Welcome back to PS2 in Review. My name is Ethan, and this time we'll be looking at something a little spooky for this year's Halloween special, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights. It was developed by Heavy Iron Studios and published by THQ for the GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2. It was released for the PlayStation 2 in North America on May 29, 2002, and received somewhat positive reviews. But have the decades been kind to Scooby and the gang, or is this a Scrappy-Doo situation? Let's find out together on this episode of PS2 in Review. Before we get started, this video wouldn't be possible without TV production classes at Jefferson College. These courses are part of the college's new Digital Communications degree program. Students have the opportunity to learn the basics of video production, including videography and editing. Students can also create content in the JCTV Media Studio on campus, where we are recording this video right now. You can learn more about all that by emailing us at jctv@jeffco.edu. Alright, let's take a look at Scooby right here. So, this is the box we've got in the cover. Really nice, standard, honestly, for Scooby-Doo. It's nothing to write home about, box art wise, to tell you the truth. However, I will say, going right to the spine, usually we save the spine for last, but I'm going to start here, because this is like a nice purple font. I don't think I own any other games with the purple font besides like Vice City, maybe? And this looks great, to tell you the truth. This looks great on the shelf. Here on the back, you've got your screenshots, bog standard screenshots. I will note, I don't know if I can get this in focus or not, those are like skulls with chains around the screenshots, which are like way more metal than Scooby-Doo needs to go, in my opinion. But anyway, it's kind of neat. Inside, got your disc, got your manual. Manual's also nothing to write home about, really. This is pretty basic tutorialization, teaching you all the buttons, some screenshots. It does tell you all of the power-ups. So if and when you get lost in this game, you know what you're supposed to be looking for, I suppose. It's got some brief things on the areas. And then a bunch of ads for Scooby-Doo memorabilia in the back. Like just lots of DVD movies and stuff it wants you to get, which, you know what? Some of these are really good. But yeah, I don't love it when my manual is mostly ads, to tell you the truth. They're not mostly, but like a good chunk of it. You got your notes pages and then your warranty in the back. But yeah, and then another ad for another Scooby-Doo game. But yeah, alright, that's about that. Altogether, honestly, it looks great on the shelf. We're going to talk about my thoughts on the game, but it looks great on the shelf. And with that, let's get to my thoughts on the game right now. Part 1. Between Intention and Result. Night of 100 Frights is a fascinating game to look back on today, because it looks so much like any of hundreds of licensed games that came out on the PS2, but it has an ambition unseen in similar titles. It has a couple of simple gimmicks and references that would make any Scooby fan say, hey look, it's the Thing! I recognize the Thing. But beneath the surface, it's actually still pretty bad. That being said, there were moments playing this game that made me think of the Metroidvania genre of all things. However, this game is ultimately a victim of its own hubris, with these more interesting choices being drowned out by a lack of care found in the moment-to-moment gameplay. The first point of friction is the platforming, which, like many a 3D platformer before and after, has a very wobbly difficulty curve. There are some rooms that had me stuck for 30 minutes or more, knowing precisely what jump to make, but not quite finding the dexterity to pull it off. Then, one room later, you find yourself being asked to perform jumps so mind-numbingly easy, you end up thinking about what you want to eat after. And that you should really watch K-pop Demon Hunters. And that even though it doesn't really look like your thing, people seem to be having a lot of fun with it, and it's only 90 minutes long, so it really wouldn't be that much of a time investment. This wild swing in relative difficulty serves only to make the hard levels harder and the easy levels easier. Rather than instilling a sense of mastery in the player, the game seems content to throw levels at the wall and see what sticks. An added layer of frustration occurs when you realize that accessing some of those levels requires meticulous collection of Scooby snacks. You are obligated to collect hundreds of these in order to open so-called snack gates. Some gates require 150 snacks, others in the late game require 750. Throughout the entire game, you must collect thousands of them. In order to collect all the ones you need, you are forced to spend extra time in areas you would otherwise breeze through, and even more time in areas you are already struggling with. I have enjoyed a collectathon or two in my time, believe me, but this combined with the wild swings in difficulty only added to my frustration. I would have preferred more care be put into other aspects of the gameplay and not into arbitrarily inflating my playtime. The frustrations I have with the game's platforming are only compounded by its worst sin, the camera. While other contemporary platformers were content to pick a lane and either be full 3D platformers or the more classic 2D platformers, and later games would make creative use of the 2.5D mixed method approach, Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights somehow manages to be a nightmarish fourth option, where the player is subject to the arbitrary whims of a seemingly malevolent camera operator. Often I found the perspective would shift mid-jump, completely throwing me off balance and causing me to miss my mark. Other pre-selected angles make judging distances nearly impossible, such as this room towards the end of the game, where you must swing on the bottoms of cages towards the camera. Games like the original Resident Evil trilogy, and even the more contemporaneous Code Veronica, would signal to the player where and when the camera would cut to a new angle via either the architecture or the protagonist's distance from the camera. Night of 100 Frights attempts no such thing, with the camera sometimes hiding where the perspective shift is going to happen, simply by not having enough lead on Scooby-Doo to show what is ahead. Sometimes this even results in damage taken, or falling into a bottomless pit you had no way of seeing. Either way, it is probably the main reason the game is frustrating. Oh, and the conveyor belts. Whoever put those in the game needs to apologize to me, personally. The admittedly shoddy craftsmanship in the level design belies a more ambitious structure to the game world. As I previously mentioned, Night of 100 Frights contains elements of the Metroidvania genre, with the player occasionally finding upgrades for Scooby-Doo that allow him to access areas found in previous levels. In theory, this is a fantastic idea for a Scooby-Doo game. What better way to map the feeling of unraveling a mystery onto gameplay than a genre whose core ethos is exploration and discovery? Unfortunately, Night of 100 Frights fails to do something crucial to Metroidvania design, namely, signal to the player when they need to remember a particular area. As Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit pointed out in his excellent series Boss Keys, ensuring that whatever locked door the player must return to is memorable is essential. Without memorable landmarks, the player is likely to end up lost, confused, and on Google trying to make sense of things. For example, in the fishing village area, there are several red vertical buttons that are all but begging to be ground pounded. But when you acquire the Thunder Smash upgrade, you are not supposed to run back to previous areas and press these buttons, but instead, these anonymous wooden planks that I didn't even see when I first walked in. Then there are the upgrades that are all but useless. The slippers and black knight armor are supposed to let you sneak past enemies, and they do. However, why you would do that is beyond me. Most enemies die in one hit, and those that don't are stunned after one hit. You are practically swimming in health pickups, and dying only sends you to the start of the room again, with all collectibles staying collected. With the penalty minor and the inconvenience of dying from combat almost non-existent, I think I ended up using the stealth system twice total. In reality, this system is the gesture in a direction of something more compelling, but it never does anything as engaging as, say, Sly Cooper would, only a few months later. Part 2. Frights and Sounds. As miserable as some of this world is to play, it can be a real pleasure to look at. The art style is a solid translation of the original show Scooby-Doo Where Are You into 3D. They even translated the original show's intro into 3D for the title menu. The characters are lively, and their dialogue scenes are rendered well. Even the mouth flaps mostly map onto what a character is supposed to be saying. Each level set feels distinct, and maintains Scooby-Doo's iconic style, even if the color palette is somewhat limited. In addition to the visuals, the sound is a real treat. I'm a particular fan of the boss fight songs, which bring to mind the songs from the original show. However, the fact that Tim Curry doesn't really sing his song as much as he speaks it is a creative decision I will never understand. The sound effects are excellent too. The sound designer, Joey Curris, it's always Joey, does a great job using classic Hanna-Barbera sound effects to make the gameplay feel more like the classic show. However, when we examine the dialogue, some cracks do slip through. Each cutscene ends with this abrupt audio cut, where there is no sound whatsoever for several seconds before gameplay resumes.
And pretty soon you won't stand a ghost of a chance.
Once gameplay does resume, you then have to listen to Scooby's running commentary. Whenever Scooby sees an enemy he recognizes, he will comment on it, saying something like, "Reapers, it's the Creeper!" or, "Ruh-roh, it's Geronimo!" Personally, if I ever have to hear, "Ruh-roh, Rabs!" again, it will have been too soon. Part 3. Our list of suspects. The villains Scooby spends most of the game recognizing are mostly from episodes of the original show, with the exception of the game's arch-villain, Mastermind. These villains roam the halls of the mansion of one Alexander Graham, who presumably bears no relation to Alexander Graham Bell. Alexander is a genius inventor and has mysteriously vanished. His niece and friend of Daphne, Holly Graham, has called Mystery Inc. in to investigate her uncle's disappearance and discover why his mansion is haunted by so many cameos. Structurally, this is just an episode of the show, with the Scooby Gang and a limited number of extras who make up our suspects. The voice of Mastermind is provided by the inimitable Tim Curry, but his voice doesn't map onto any of the other supporting characters, leaving us to guess who is behind the mask. Some of the main cast from the original show return, but this is solidly the 90s and early 2000s era of Scooby-Doo voice actors. They may not be the original cast, but they're a pack of great actors putting on a fantastic show. Of the cast, Scott Innes gets the most time to shine as an iconic Scooby and Shaggy. As annoying as Scooby can sometimes be, he is great. Grey DeLisle does a good job as Daphne and Holly, but it probably would have been better to cast a second actress for Holly. DeLisle's voices for both characters are almost the same, just one octave apart. This is most definitely not her fault. In my opinion, this smells of a directing mistake. Apart from Tim Curry, another celebrity voice actor is in the cast. Don Knotts, of all people, plays the groundskeeper, a character who does little more than give the player tutorials or exposition. And among these moments, he has less than 10 spoken lines, with the rest being simple lines of text for the player to read. Now, he does show up at the very end of the game to perform what is essentially his Type 5 about how being a groundskeeper sucks, before we learn the identity of the mastermind. As for his identity, I won't spoil it, but it wasn't a particularly satisfying answer. Doubly so if you're expecting the original show's pattern of inserting some kid-friendly social critique into its reveals. Part 4. Conclusion. Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights is an ambitious game that promises much and delivers little. Its platforming vacillates between being simple and being cruel. While its story is fun enough and its visuals are pretty impressive, it wasn't as memorable as any of the episodes of the show, or even some of the straight-to-DVD movies that were coming out at the time. For a first Scooby game on the PS2, it's a worthwhile effort, but, like its villain, ends up being little more than smoke, mirrors, and a cool costume. That being said, what did you think of Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights? Should we get a new Scooby game to really bring the gang back into the spotlight, or do you prefer the classics? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more PS2 in review.